Okay.
Hello, welcome everyone to the Resonance Academy Faculty Q&A for July. I'm William Brown. I'm a molecular biologist and biophysicist doing research with Nassim and our colleagues, other scientists at the Resonance Science Foundation, like Dr. Ines Urdaneta, who's joining us here. Hi, Ines.
Hey, hi, William. Hi, everyone. So happy to be here.
So this is a great opportunity for all of us to come together and discuss aspects of unified physics, aspects of the science, the unified science that's presented in the Resonance Academy course. So as you're going through the course, if you're coming up with questions or blazing insights, this is the place to come to share those and discuss. So we'll look forward to seeing your questions and comments. So if you're new to the Q&A session here, there is a Q&A tab. That's where we filled all the questions. There's also the chat section, which is more for just commenting. Don't put your questions in the chat, but certainly feel free to set that to everyone. So your messages are going to everyone and say hello and where you're joining from. And if you have a question, it can go into the Q&A. There's also a voting mechanism for the Q&A so that if you don't perhaps have a specific question, but you do see one that you would like to have discussed, it can be upvoted. So what have you been up to, Ines?
Hi. Oh, okay. So the thing is that it's like most exciting for me at the moment is that we have the launching, I don't know how to say that, the presentation of the book of the, let's say, yeah. So this book is called Shintergy. It's so I wrote a chapter for it, me and another physicist. So we're having this collaboration in Mexico going on with someone who was trained by a doctor called Jacobo Greenberg. He's a Mexican. He went missing suddenly, mysteriously on 94, but he was working on researching, doing measurements. In fact, this person created a laboratory in the most important university in Mexico, which is called UNAM, and he did consciousness studies laboratory, which was funded by the government, by the laboratory, by the university, and it did create it's important at the time. And at that moment, he was studying, so he was very interested in trying to understand the functioning of the brain, and if there was any measurement that could give evidence of an interaction of the brain with the quantum field, let's say. So yeah, it was he has many articles published. He was not so known inside in Mexico, but he was very well known in China, in the USA, in Germany. So yeah, and suddenly he just went missing when he was about to start some experiments with a laser field. So the person would go into this, the kind of experiments that they would do is, for instance, have two persons who are interacting, and then they would place them in different rooms, and then they would do some measurements. And they, for instance, this was one that was very important. Let's say you first have to entangle them, which means they have to interact at some point. Then you put them in separate rooms, and then say that you place their electrodes on both heads, and then let's say that on one of the persons in different rooms, you place a flash in their side, and there will have some reaction to that. And you will see that both encephalograms have the same you know, at the moment, even though the other person is not in the same room. So these are the kind of measurements that he would record, and he would I'm not sure he got to publish all of them. I don't think so. But in any case, the next stage was the laser. So having this person interacting with the laser and seeing if there's any way that we could see some changes in the detection of the photonic at the other side of the, let's say, on the detector. And so 30 years after, almost, with a person who was trained by him and that was working with him at the last year, in the last year before he disappeared, we got to reproduce, we got to do some experiments with very interesting team, a physicist that came along, a plasma physicist, me as a molecular atomic physicist, and this person, and an engineer, and an aeronautical engineer. He was the one who designed the setup, the experimental setup. And so we just started doing some measurements, and we got some very interesting results. And so so this book that's coming out, it's basically telling, like, narrating the whole story from the beginning, from this person. Like it's kind of a novel, but it's a documentary, in fact, kind of novelated, in which this person describes his trajectory, and then the experiments go along. And so it's a very dynamic read. And at the end, so we describe the experiments, the results we had. Maybe I could show at some point some of them here, very short ones that I have, because I have them ready, because we placed them in the book as well. And then these experiments, we tried to replicate some of it in Torres Tech at that time when I went with them. And it's a very different setup. It was very different. It was much more complicated to reproduce it in much more rigorous experimental setups like the ones you have over there. So we have to reproduce everything again. We would have to repeat the things at some point. But well, the thing is that our conclusions is that we really find correlations between this contemplative state of this person and the laser field. And it's pretty clear. So yeah, so I'm very excited. The book is going to come in two weeks. That's Friday, 29th of July. And so then I want to write, I think they're asking for the name of the person. I want to write it here. Yeah. Okay, so this person who went missing, his name is Jacobo. Well, I'll write it down. Jacobo Greenberg. And there's even a doctor. I don't know why a host and panelist. Wait, I have to change that. Jacobo Greenberg. And he went missing in '94. And there's a documentary about him. It's called The Secret of Dr. Greenberg. And the person who's doing the book here is Jose Luis Bueno Shin. That's like his segment. So, and the book is called Shintergy, The Back Door. The back door it's referring to the fact that that after all these trainings he did with monks, with Tibetan monks, with Dzogchen tradition, with Bon tradition, he got to understand deeply the philosophy behind, so that he could train people in, let's say, 3-4 years. They don't have to go through the whole 30 years training he had. In just 3-4 years, they could very probably reach the same state. So that's the idea. That's the idea of promoting this theory and everything. And of course, we want to have then a theoretical framework for it. And the theoretical framework would evidently be the consciousness that we would develop in our research with Nassim's model. So we hope that it would like encompass both of these frameworks, let's say. So that's really, really exciting.
So you have a methodology in awareness, meditation methodology. And then you also have empirical studies, observational science that shows its effects.
In fact, the idea would be to have like some kind of certification afterwards. Let's say you have the meditation, because it could be the kind of meditation he teaches, but maybe some other people have another way of training and they want to know how much of it, because we're getting into a level. This first stage is, let's say it's a preliminary stage. We saw important correlations, but we have to explain what they were, how were they, how did they come to be, and all of that. So that's the theoretical part that we really have to go into that. But at some point, Jose Luis, the person who's doing this contemplative states, he says that he perceives degrees of density. So he calls them axes. So he's got he has detected at least 13 axes from this that we're talking about in the book. But then apparently there are much more. There are at least 21 from what he knows of all his studies and all of that. But it's interesting because it goes on the same direction that the holographic model, because we have degrees of density levels, and that's exactly what the model is about. So
yeah. So it's almost kind of like what level your awareness is focusing down into, like the atomic level, the subatomic level, intervals in between, down into like the Planck field, where you probably have like universal awareness.
That's like the idea. It would be like to have a very well established these differences, and if you have reached that state, like to measure that, and then that would be it's like having a heart math, the heart math apparatus that measures synchronization of the brain and the heart. Well, we're trying like to do something of the sort, but measuring, I don't know, I don't know if you can measure consciousness, but it's just measuring the coupling, your coupling with the field. That's what we think we could measure, like some kind of coupling with the field. Yeah, at some point. Yeah, but this is very preliminary, but we have to keep, this is just starting, but this is like the first step.
But that's really important science, because if you can understand, if you can measure that coupling, you can better understand how it's occurring. You could do things to perhaps even technologically augment that coupling. Well, then also, our own meditative capacity, you could probably increase the ability to couple, but also it has potential technological applications, which is a very interesting aspect of it, because in my picture of it, it's not only that the aspect of awareness, but that coupling is also health and wellness, health states of the body too. So the potential applications of that kind of study and the understanding that comes from it, I think, are very significant.
I think I agree completely with you, because when Jose Luis got sick of the pandemic, of this thing, the COVID, he almost passed away. He was very close to it. I mean, when you see his lungs, and how he reverted his state was really impressive. So that would go in this direction of saying, okay, he couldn't prevent it from getting sick, and from getting really sick. So, but the thing is that afterwards he was able to revert and even go back to his complete healthy body, when it is supposed not to happen. It's supposed that once you have this disease, then, and if it got so serious and it's damaged at least 50% of your lungs, then you're screwed. You have to go in a wheelchair. We will have to have oxygen for who knows how many months. And that was his case. I mean, he was more. I mean, if I showed you pictures of his lungs, you would like say that's not possible for him to be alive.
Recovered.
Wow. Or have recovered, at least be alive maybe, but recovered to have a normal life as nothing has happened. I think so. I completely agree that this is something that regenerates your body, for sure. Yeah. Well, we have to be very cautious about what we say, but let's say that there seems to be evidence is going in that direction. This is what I would say, as well as there seems to be evidences of going in the direction of measuring this coupling through the experiments we did. So yeah, that would be.
Well, and so the book is coming out in a couple weeks. It's going to be available on like Amazon?
Yeah, it's first coming in Spanish, then it's got to be translated into English, and then I think I will take 1 month more, so maybe in September, and then I guess it would be Amazon. Yeah, it's
Awesome.
gonna be through Amazon. Yeah.
And do you have a paper that's being published as well that goes with it? Or?
Yeah, we have, okay, so we have drafts. We don't have, we haven't published anything yet. We have the drafts, which are loaded in Zenodo and in ResearchGate. I can show them. We're just redoing most of the calculations and putting, because the first draft we had, it was really, really difficult to read. So yeah, to explain, it was very, very poorly explained. So I said, let's do it all over. And so now we're just doing all the present case. We did many measurements in the different scenarios. Let's say there's this case when the person is like, let's say, behind the laser, and it's doing his meditation, and there's, so you make measurements of baselines and during the experiment the same day at the same time. Then there's non-locality in space and time, and so all these cases we have to do a draft for each one of them, so everything, before we had everything in the same, and so it was very difficult to read and very, like, yeah, exaggerated. But now we have to, like, like, we're going into each stage, and yeah. So, but the first one, maybe I can find, while we're doing, I can find this Zenodo link, and you can put it there so that you can read at least that part, which is present case. Yellow is present case, which is the person is in front of the laser and measurements are being made at that moment in space and time. Yeah,
because you also have trans-temporal effects, effects of people, cases where people or participants are affecting outcomes in a future experiment, or retroactively affecting the experiment.
Yeah, those
so
are
interesting.
It is incredible. Yeah. It is very, very, and I wouldn't believe, this is like so crazy, but because Jacobo Greenberg, precisely, he had okay, so I'll talk just a little bit about him. He was a neurophysiologist. He did his PhD in New York. And he was really interested in studying the interaction of shamans, these shamans and Buddhist monks and all of that. And he was one of the assistants. He was the main assistant of a shaman in Mexico called Pachita, Bárbara Guerreros. Bárbara Palacios is a Venezuelan, Miss Venezuela, Bárbara Guerrero, and she got, so, and she did so many interventions. So she was a healer. She healed so many people in a state that she called Hermano Cuauhtémoc. She would say that she was channeling Cuauhtémoc. Cuauhtémoc was the last Tlatoani in Mexico. He was the last, let's say, leader of the Aztec community, okay, before the Spanish came and took over. So, and that's called Tlatoani. So he was the last Tlatoani, and so she would go into this state in which this person would come in and do the miracle during the intervention. And by miracle, I would say things that you wouldn't believe could be possible, like materializing organs and replacing organs, just using a knife from your kitchen and things like that. So that was so. And the thing is that she was trying to be debunked by many people, and they couldn't manage to do that. So having that kind of experience for Greenberg was like life-changing. He said, "Oh my God! So everything I know is completely wrong. Maybe not wrong, but we are missing a huge piece of the puzzle." And that huge piece of the puzzle is understanding that the brain, the neural network on the brain, is doing something with the space that we don't understand really well. So that's what he got into. That's what motivated him. He's written 49 books. He's got, I don't know how many articles published, papers published. And yeah, so he really took it seriously. And we are honored to be like having some kind of connection with his work through this collaboration that we're having here in Mexico. And so, yeah, so it's really
very
nice.
exciting. Yeah. Wow. And somebody was asking, what's the name of the book?
Of the book again? Oh.
The name.
Yeah, the title of the book, you mean?
Yeah, yeah. Your
Yeah.
book, your book, yeah.
Okay, I'll write it again. Enter the back door. There you go.
Yeah, okay.
Shinterji, the back door, yeah. Shinterji, Shin means apprentice. And Terji means, let's say, the lattice, the consciousness field. So this would be translated to the apprentice of the field of consciousness.
Wow, wow, wow.
Yeah, yeah, it's beautiful. Yeah, it's really, yeah, really exciting.
And that's certainly where you know, the unified physics comes into it, is that, you know, consciousness, especially in terms of the biophysics of what our brain is doing, is very much a field-like interaction. Probably very simply stated, an electromagnetic interaction, field interaction. You know, the brain is generating very specific electromagnetic oscillatory patterns, spatiotemporal patterns, and these are coupling with the unified space memory network, the field, to transduce information from the field into physical experience, physical awareness. So, you know, I can see where the description on the physical level via the unified science can come in. That's, I think it'll be a really interesting aspect of the research you're doing.
Yeah, I'm sure of that. Yeah, we're just waiting to have a, well, we started already writing a little bit of the consciousness paper, you and me and Nassim. So we'll just go from there.
So I'll just kind of give a brief update
And
so that we
yeah,
can.
what are you up to, William?
You know, I don't have anything as exciting as
Nah,
a book is coming out. A book is being published. Yeah, so, that's just
in biology, you have many things to share, I'm sure.
There are just a lot of interesting developments, discoveries that I've been researching and applying to our work. One of the very interesting studies that I was looking at in our applying it to our biophysics research, and again, some of the predictions that we've made based on our model of how unified physics is operating in the biological system. There's been a very strong correlation that's been made between the processes involved in increased cognitive capabilities of organisms. This is often correlated with increase in brain size, increases in neuronal tissue, the central nervous system. There's been some very strong correlates that have been made very recently on what changes in the DNA are corresponding to these increased cognitive capabilities, sophisticated cognitive capabilities. And this is a particularly central aspect of our research into biophysics is how the DNA molecule, the genome, is interfacing with the field to affect this exchange of information that then goes on to shape the organism. You know, like the morphogenesis of the living system via the DNA. And so when you're looking at the genome of multicellular organisms, eukaryotic organisms, one striking thing is that only about 2% of the DNA is coding for proteins. Now, proteins are the normal, conventional kind of Darwinian evolutionary mechanism for making a phenotype. So that's usually the line that's drawn between the code of the DNA to the morphological characteristics of the organism, is that the DNA codes for proteins. Proteins make the structural and functional enzymatic components of the cell. and many cells come together to make the organism. But those protein coding regions only account for 2% of the DNA, and they're relatively highly conserved across very disparate species. So in terms of the protein coding regions,
it's always 2%, no matter the species.
Yeah. I mean, for eukaryotic organisms, multicellular organisms, and that's kind of an interesting thing, just because unicellular organisms of the prokaryotes, which are like bacteria and archaea, they don't have subcellular organelles, internal compartmentalization of the cell. They don't have this situation. Their genomes are like these really highly efficient genomes. For one thing, they're circular plasmids, but they don't have non-coding regions, very little regulatory regions of the DNA. It's almost all just protein coding regions, which is an interesting thing. It's not 100% like that, but in terms of the multicellular branch of the animal kingdom, the vast majority of the DNA doesn't appear to have a direct protein coding function. And so, that's a highly conserved across species, and even within that 2%, across tissues, across cells in the body, 80% of that is expressed in a very cell tissue specific manner, a very selective manner. So it's not expressed the same across all cells and all tissues of the body. Now, if you look at that 98%, this is what has been kind of historically, conventionally called the junk DNA, just because it kind of broke that paradigm of DNA codes for proteins, proteins make cells, and this didn't have a direct protein coding function as far as could be ascertained. But if you look at that, 50% of it is these mobile genetic elements, what are kind of popularly called jumping genes. So what has been emerging is the understanding that these mobile genetic elements are very strongly correlated with increases in higher or more sophisticated cognitive capabilities in the organism. If you look in the central nervous system, the brain, for instance, of humans, there's a high degree of activity of these mobile genetic elements, more so than in other species. And one of the elements that I studied and have wrote about quite extensively is the Lu retrotransposon. And what's interesting is that you can correlate the expansion and activity of this retrotransposon, the Lu mobile gene element, to expansions in human brain size over the past 200, 300,000 years, where it doubled and then tripled in size. And this seems to be very strongly correlated with these mobile genetic elements. There was a group of researchers out of Italy that did this comprehensive analysis of the transcriptome. The transcriptome is all of the RNA or mRNA elements of the genome. So the DNA has the codes, the nucleotide codons that is transcribed into RNA, messenger RNA, mRNA. They did this comprehensive analysis of the transcriptome of a couple of species of the octopus clade. And it was very fascinating because they found that it was, in terms of the activity and expansion of mobile genetic elements, it was very similar to what is seen in humans.
God.
but not necessarily other animals. In most other animals, these mobile genetic elements are silenced. Their activity is repressed. The two major examples where this isn't the case is in the human brain and apparently in the octopus brain, where you have this very sophisticated cognitive behavior in an invertebrate species, a species that doesn't have a spine or a skeletal system.
Yeah.
So it's a very interesting correlate. So, it just it is confirming what we've been investigating and suspecting, that these mobile gene elements are, in terms of the functionality of the DNA, involved in this coupling with the information field of the space memory network and affecting changes in the brain that lead to expanded capabilities, more sophisticated capabilities in its field interaction, its transduction mechanism of information with the field.
Oh, okay. So let me see. So then we descend from octopuses. Because they're older than us, so
they are, yeah. It's very interesting though, because these, just on a more kind of speculative note, these genetic elements, they come from exogenous foreign DNA that's been introduced into the organism. So they oftentimes come from retroviral elements. So it's very interesting that you have these examples of this retroviral insertion of DNA in these two species, and it increases their intelligence, their sophistication. It's interesting to speculate.
Yeah.
What could be going on there? Is that entirely natural? I mean, it could be, but it's an interesting thought.
So you would say then that these transposons would be, because we're okay. So let's connect that with the consciousness topic. So you would say that this would be happening, like say, the microtubules in the brain, like they're the ones that are transducing the information from the field, let's say, and then that would go also through this, and the transposons are the ones that created this ability of the human brain, like to have this higher capacity in, let's say, information processing, let's say, So, okay, I can see a thread there. I can see it. Fascinating. That's fascinating.
Yeah, because one of the things that they do have the direct function in is remodeling the nuclear DNA. So remodeling, so that's like you've got a gene element here and a gene cassette here, and this position is important for how it's read and expressed in the neuron, let's say. What these mobile genetic elements that are active in the human and octopus brain do is that they come in and they rearrange the positioning and order of these gene elements, these gene cassettes. And they can also even result in alternative splicing, so that you've got a DNA code that says make protein A, very specific configuration, conformation of a protein. They'll come in and rearrange that, alternatively splicing it, so that it makes protein B, completely new, novel kind of protein. Now, if that protein is a microtubule associated protein, all of a sudden it's interacting with the microtubule network completely differently.
Okay.
And who knows, maybe the rearrangement gives it a configuration that maintains higher coherence, higher entanglement within the cell and within the environment. So it's acting more quantum in nature, a more non-local interaction with the field. So, these are the possible mechanisms by which these mobile genetic elements can affect expansion and increases in cognitive capabilities.
Yeah, and this all happening through water, no? Because it's basically the water, with the interface of the with the water. Yeah, this is.
Yeah. The water is central. Well, central to just about every process, but certainly, you know, when you're talking about information process and information exchange
Yeah.
with the field, whether it's in the DNA, the microtubule system, the whole cellular system, the brain, neuronal network. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, okay. I don't want to take more time for the questions, but I just yeah, it's just that Montagnier was he the biologist who found out that DNA could have in a sample of water, DNA was extracted, and the sample of water was having the same properties as the DNA that was being placed in there. I don't
He
Montagnier, right?
Dr. Luc Montagnier, and for those who don't know, he won a Nobel Prize for work he did in the 1980s on finding that the HIV virus was the virus causing AIDS, autoimmune disorder syndrome. But he is one of the preeminent scientists that did empirical studies showing this interaction of DNA with water. But it was really remarkable because one of the things that he did was he isolated a electromagnetic signature from pathological bacterial DNA. So bacteria that is involved in causing disease in the human system. He was able to identify very specific electromagnetic signals, frequencies, that were coming from that pathological bacteria DNA. He would put that isolated DNA into water, and then in a Faraday cage isolated from ambient electromagnetic signals, he would introduce a like a I think it was like a 4 or 7 hertz frequency into the medium with the bacterial DNA in the water. And then he could see that when he took that, removed all the bacterial DNA, so only the water remained, he could put in polymerase enzymes that replicate DNA. He could put that into the solution and reconstitute the bacterial DNA when there was none in the solution.
Oh my God.
You know, so it's something that is really remarkable, and you know, perhaps naively, it's difficult to believe that you could even do that. But if you understand some of the you know, physical mechanisms of how water is actually forming a chiral heterogeneous structure around the DNA, and that chiral heterogeneous structure of ordered liquid crystalline water is important not only to holding the DNA in specific configurations, but also in acting as a medium of information exchange. It's not that hard to understand that if you remove the DNA, you might still have that structured water, that liquid crystalline water, that it preserves the information of the DNA codes that were there. So it could potentially reconstitute the DNA just off the imprint in the water memory structure.
Wow, incredible. Well.
It's interesting, very interesting research, very interesting work. Yeah. Dr. Luc Montagnier.
Luc Montagnier. Yeah. Okay, perfect.
So do you see a question you might want to take?
Why? Well, there's Pamela saying that her chat is disabled.
Oh, well, no, it's weird. When we started, for some reason, Zoom had automatically set the chat to be disabled. So I had to go in and like manually click that everyone can talk with everyone. So I don't know what the deal was, but that's been fixed though. So the chat's operational now.
Okay. Okay, so we have the first question that was voted. It's well, we have two first questions. That's Jeff Colebrook. So he's asking about group healing. It has been reported in the group of Lean, McTaggart, and Joe Dispenza that a shift of consciousness takes place in miracle healings that can be measured, in biology. So that the power of the group inspires and energizes these experiences of powerful healing events. How can unified science, or what we can focus on as a group within the unified field model to shift consciousness, initiate healing events? Well, that's a very complex question. Okay. Um, Jeff, so maybe we can bring him up to the, do we know how to?
Yeah, I can probably get him his video pulled up.
Uh-huh. Wow. Mhm. There you go.
I'm here, I guess. At least you can hear me.
Hey, hi Jeff. Wait, you can hear you.
Yeah, I don't know if you can see me, but you can hear me.
No, we cannot see you. Your camera is off?
Don't think so, but
That's weird.
that's okay.
Okay.
Yes. I get to, I'm sure there's a being a shift of consciousness around healing that is so linked to understanding about the unified field model, and people are coming together and using non-local communities to enact healing events. But what happens is folks have to kind of believe it or take a shift in thinking. And I'm just thinking, how can understanding what parts of unified physics can focus on to help us shift our awareness that we can do these things, especially in community as a group, where we can, by our intentions, change biology.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I actually belong to a group out of Ithaca, New York, that seems to be getting amazing results, what they call the Circle of Eight, meeting and focusing on attentions. But it's interesting to see the shift in our thinking over time that allows that to become more powerful.
Yeah, well, I would say, well, first of all, okay, so many things I have thought about of things that are related to it because of what we have been doing in consciousness and what happened with this case of the shaman woman. I was not so long ago asking Jose Luis, what was that what made it for her to be possible to do this kind of healings? And I thought that because one thing is to, to do a very small like change, but another very different thing is to even be able to materialize some organ and replace it. And that's just another scale. That's another scale. So then I thought that maybe okay, so there are many things. One of it is that we know consciousness is not an isolated system, meaning by that all scales are connected, in the sense that in the consciousness of this healer woman, probably many, as in any consciousness from everyone, the consciousness at the level of the cell, at the level of the atom, at the level of the solar system, they're all connected. They're all having this, participating in the consciousness of each scale, let's say. So somehow I thought that this person was having a resonance in which many referential frames of observation were converging into this person, so such that this resonance is assisting her to do that. I don't know if I'm explaining myself. So the same thing would happen with a group of people. If you have a group of people, and this is another thing that I have always asked myself, when we would have to understand what resonance really means. It means that the elements are in the proper place for an event to manifest. So because the elements are in the proper place, let's say, or meaning by this, what happens is always the result of a resonance. Everything, the reality we see is a resonance everywhere. And so this means that this is the what we see, what manifests is the result of the elements that are being in resonance at that moment. So the concept of resonance is extremely important here, and in general in consciousness. So I would say that if these people, this group of people are already synchronized because they're doing such a certain type of meditation where they're being guided by, let's say, Joe Dispenza, or the person who's guiding the exercise, that it's containing the energy of the place, and it's containing it's giving contention and routine to this process, then very probably people are getting synchronized, like the clocks that you have, that when you have different, yeah, exactly. But what synchronizes it is that they're not isolated, that there's the field inside, in between. Just as when you have the table and the clocks, they're getting synchronized, not because they are isolated, but because the vibration is going to the table, and so this is doing as a coupler. So it's coupling the vibrations of all the clocks. So
one of the experiments I thought we started a meditation group trying to grow this concept of coming together in a group. It was to see if we couldn't synchronize our art crystals in a pendulum swing. Haven't done that yet, but it would be interesting. As I say, we have been starting a group which I would like to see continue into something like a circle of 8, so we can initiate healing. But yeah, it's I'd love to see if we can't synchronize in our consciousness in a group from Resonance Science Foundation.
Because what's getting synchronized is so that's an interesting research. What is it that it's getting synchronized? Because in the clocks, it's the ticking of the clocks, but in a human, what is it that it's getting synchronized? So is it the heartbeat? Is it the correlation mind heartbeat without everyone else? What is it? I think that's an important question to answer. And so in this case, when you have, so let's say you arrived to have this synchronicity among everyone. So what you're having there is a resonant chamber that is amplifying the effect, and that I could see happening. So I don't know what the mechanism would make the synchronization happen, but once it is happening, then it's for sure being like a resonant chamber. And if that's the case, whatever it's placed inside, it's being amplified. So that would for sure amplify the effects of what's being processed and worked in the group. So yeah, and that's something very similar probably to something that I've heard. I've never done it, but I know it's very effective. Something called family constellations. It's the same principle in the sense that when you place the elements, how does this work is fascinating. You have a person, and so it's got a situation in his personal life that it's demanding, that it's complex, and so he asks for other people to take the place of the other persons involved in his life or her life, like, I don't know, the mother, the husband, the brother, and suddenly out of nowhere, all these people start to have feelings, see images, understand process, and suddenly something gets revealed, but that's getting revealed because the resonance is happening. So the resonance, so the concept of resonance is extremely important. Yes, so that would be my impression on that.
Thank you. Yeah, resonance. That's the good thing to focus. And you mentioned the heart coherence part too, and yeah,
the breathing. I mean, I probably would start by breathing. I would start with the breathing. I think I would say that that's the place where the synchronization is happening.
Yeah, I'd love to see more of our community, building community where we can use each other in a resonance way to support and heal each other. So, and again, we are having a monthly group meditation, so we'll see what evolves out of that. But I think it's an important part of the conversation to use this knowledge and wisdom to heal each other. So I think that's fascinating. And thank you, and wonderful what you're both doing. Wow.
Thanks.
Yeah, it's your book, you know, it's just, and it's amazing being able to have the science, which also breaks our old thinking. You know, it's like it opens up our minds so we get out of that paradigm that says we can't do these healing things, that we are able to work together to, you know, put out intentions of healing that are powerful as a group. So yeah, thank you again for all your work. It's always lovely to be part of this. Blessings.
Thanks, Jeff. Thanks.
Thank you, Jeff. Always very interesting questions and insights to share there. Keeping along this conversation, this thread on consciousness, there's a really interesting question from Simon Sky asking, in your research, is consciousness, how you define it, once created, can it or does it exist forever within the feed-forward network of space memory, similar to the proton? Do you think consciousness requires water or light to exist? Is it like a particle of some sort within the mitochondria or some other cellular structure once the body is formed? These are really important points that I think go to the heart of a science of consciousness. I know Ines will have some valuable contributions.
Go ahead, William.
Okay. Well, maybe I should. I can pull up Simon. If you would like, Simon, your video will be pulled up. You can feel free to talk. If you'd rather not show your video or talk, it's no problem. I don't want to put you on the spot.
Sure. I don't know if you can hear me.
We can hear you.
I don't know. Maybe something with your video, because my video is on, but it's not.
Yeah, Jeff was having the same problem. You know, some of the settings have been changed on Zoom, so I'll have to figure out why it's not letting people show their video.
Yeah. So what prompted that question is what you both were going into, and my head is spinning in a luxurious way, taking all this in. But what you were talking about, both of you, and you, William, about the mitochondria and something about light just got me thinking, as Ines was talking at the beginning, about how this consciousness may function at a, biophysics level, as well as what Ines is talking about in that research.
Yeah. The level of where consciousness is coming in at the biophysics level within the cell is actually one of the primary areas of investigation that me, Ines, and Nassim have going right now, because he just solved this unification of forces, constants, and particles that is a scale relationship, a holographic ratio, and a fractalized space-time. and so we can take these solutions and look at the mathematics of the transfer of information across scale. And so that's an important aspect of it, is that one of the reasons consciousness has had difficulties finding a comfortable location within scientific discourse is that it doesn't fit in well with the normal methodology of reductionist science, and that for like a neuron to figure out how it functions and how it comes into being, you can identify smaller components of it, isolate those and describe them, and then better understand how they come together to make a neuron. The problem on trying to apply that reductionism to consciousness is that it doesn't reduce. You don't have non-conscious elements that are coming together
I see.
and then giving you consciousness. So you're at the end of the line of a reductionist methodology to a certain extent. I think you can still describe to a certain extent an emergentist structure dynamic to it, in that and so you're talking about like a particle of consciousness.
Yeah.
I think that you can delineate that kind of quantum of consciousness, where you have in what is popularly referred to as proto-conscious units. You can have like an emergentist type mechanism where those are coming together and where you have resonant interaction so that they're coupling together and you have integration, and now the information exchange occurring between those units are happening much more efficiently with much higher fidelity. And if you're involving quantum mechanical mechanisms in a non-local way, so it's the information exchange is occurring in some cases faster than the speed of light, quasi-instantaneously. That's one of the key points, is that consciousness, you're at the end of the line for a reductionistic approach, a reductionistic methodology, which works well in many areas of science, but not when it comes to consciousness. It's an ontological primary.
I see.
And when you look at the elements engendering awareness or consciousness, which are things like integration, communicativity, that's the information exchange among proto-conscious units, all of these things, it has to do with the complexity of the system. You need a certain level of complexity of the system, a certain threshold for all these elements engendering awareness to be there. And again, this is where you can describe to some extent, emergentist mechanisms and something that is non-emergent, something that is primary. And so you have examples of that, like in the brain, highly complex system, the elements, highly complex elements coming together in very sophisticated ways, forming resonant connections, integrating and synchronizing information processing, which gives you expanded awareness, expanded cognitive capabilities. But one of the things is in a hollow fractal universe, that complexity is scale invariant. That's the definition of a fractal system, and very much so we successfully describe the physics of the universe using fractal properties, fractal space-time, which means that this complexity that you see like in the brain is scale invariant. So you can actually go out to the largest scales, the cosmological scales, and this has been done and shown mathematically that you have the same level of complexity as the human brain in like large dark matter, cosmic web filaments. Dark matter is a bad word for us. But there's a couple of researchers. We have articles available on the Resonant Science Foundation, but they did calculations on like looking at gas flow dynamics, torus and double torus like gas flow dynamics in the cosmic web structure along the boundaries. And their output for some of their calculations was that the number of interactions are in the order of 10 to the 15 per second. a quintillion calculations per second. That's the same value as the brain, what's given for the brain conventionally.
Yeah. Wow.
So it's just that with the scale invariant structure, you have the level of complexity necessary to support consciousness at the mesoscale, the micro scale, the macro scale, across scales.
And there's also something Nassim always reminds us, is that one thing is talking about consciousness and another one is talking about self-awareness. So it seems that this mechanism of higher complexity in organisms, in biology, is happening such as to allow this organism to be self-aware. So I would say that there's like this ontological consciousness, proto-consciousness, like say substrate, which would be in fact that was very interesting question, because when I got to an idea a long time ago in 2004, when I was working, because my field of studies is light matter interaction. So I got to have some kind of the description of this interaction using a different methodology, a different way of thinking than what quantum electrodynamics offers. And in this, and while doing this exercise, which was mainly trying to find the irreducible representation of information exchange, I found myself with diagrams that were representing a double torus dynamics. So that's when I thought that this could be the vacuum fluctuations. This double torus dynamics would be like the vacuum fluctuations. And then these vacuum fluctuations, this double torus dynamics that's got an inward outward and an outward inward dynamics would be like a neo-retrofeedback unit. So this is the hypothesis that I was putting forward in front of Nassim and the team, like to see that the Planck, the PSU, the Planck spherical unit is also a unit of consciousness, like a quantum of consciousness in that sense, in the sense that it is, yeah. So when you do that, and it was amazing because at that time, I mean, when Nassim solves the Einstein field equations and he finds this double torus dynamics, that's talking about mass, basically, no? Mass energy, which is like the relativity equations. Meanwhile, I was working on light matter interaction, which is a quantum phenomena, quantum world. It's so the fact that the unification of both fields through these diagrams was something extremely relevant to me, because I said, okay, so if I have this double torus dynamics depicted from the perspective of quantum mechanics, let's say, and I get to find these equations, this behavior as well as a solution of Einstein's field equation, which is also having this double torus dynamics in the described by the same Lie algebra, then this is saying that both things are equivalent, are the same. So basically, this feedback feed-forward mechanism is what I call the it's the process of consciousness. Let's say, in the sense that there's this flux of information going from the outside in and from the inside out, and so then and then of course, if you have this as an intrinsic property of space-time, or that's what's building space, then you could say that it's all consciousness, it's all proto-consciousness. And of course, the way this consciousness organizes itself, it seems to be going in the direction of creating higher complexity organisms, such that they are able to perceive themselves, like have consciousness, self-awareness, have awareness of their self. And that's amazing, because that makes perfect sense. That's like it totally makes sense. And the universe trying to see,
yes,
birthing all these reference frames of observation in order to be able to see itself, to perceive itself. So it's a beautiful way of looking at it. And yeah, definitely the particle of consciousness came into this discussion. And and we're trying to see how to have this unit precisely described. If it's quantifiable, this neural retrofeedback unit, how much of it is it? So can you count it like for me it is like a unit of consciousness, 1, 2, 3 units of consciousness, like that, of proto-consciousness. And then I was going to say a second thing. What was it? Yeah, so yeah, I lost
Regarding water or anything?
Sorry?
Regarding water, was there anything?
Oh, well, no, then water would be water. As I see, water is like the octave of the field, of the quantum field.
Okay.
So yeah, so it's just this fractal scaling, which is pretty important. So it's kind of interfacing, you know, with the Blanca scales got this, so it can interface with other and create other scales and like that. It is yeah, but in everything would come, like, say, like in that sense would be conscious, as we're saying, conscious and self-conscious, and going into higher levels of complexity as to arrive to a state of self-awareness.
Well, thank you. That's
Yeah.
beautiful. Both beautifully explaining and getting insight into this question. I appreciate it.
It's a very complex question. Thanks.
Sure thing.
Okay.
Yeah, I think this Zoom must be something with the video today. Doesn't work. I don't see anything on here for video, but I was on Zoom earlier today, so who knows?
Yeah, I'm looking at all the settings. I don't see any option for turning on or off. Yeah. So
consciousness has set in and done something.
Thank you for the question, though, Simon. And yeah, you know, it says consciousness is existing at a level more fundamental than that of water, because you have it down in the quantum vacuum fluctuations, the ordered phases of quantum vacuum fluctuations, which actually make up the water molecule. So, you know, you probably have a fair amount of consciousness in a single water molecule, but that's coming at an even more fundamental level than the atomic molecular level. But so you do need light to have consciousness, though, because those quantum vacuum fluctuations are electromagnetic quantum harmonic oscillations. So, you know, it's light.
Yeah. Fascinating.
Yeah. And you reminded me as well of this person in Marseille who had an accident and went to the doctor, and he was made scanning his brain, and they found out that 90% of his brain was water.
Wow. That's a really interesting case.
The Lancet. It was published in the Lancet, the best journal for medicine. Let me see if I find it.
Yeah, if you could write it in there so we can spell it. It's fascinating.
And there's actually other instances of this, because you have a condition called hydrocephaly, where you have expansion of the lateral ventricles, or the ventricular system in general. So, you know, at the center of the brain, there are these fluid-filled cavities, the lateral ventricles, the third ventricle, fourth ventricle, and actually they're continuous with the spinal column, and they produce and pump cerebrospinal fluid throughout the brain and up and down the spine. But you can have a situation where those become enlarged. And like in this individual that Ines is pulling up the information for, it was like extremely enlarged, whereas like 90% of his cranial capacity was just the lateral ventricles. But he could function relatively normally. And so actually, and in some cases of hydrocephaly, you get like Savant Syndrome, where like these children who have these enlarged, essentially vacuoles of water in the brain, have like genius type capabilities. So it just shows that actually, in terms of what the brain is doing and consciousness and intelligence, the ventricles and this water that we call cerebrospinal fluid is playing a really central and important role in that.
Yeah, yeah. Wow.
Yeah, it is clear that we won't address correctly consciousness if water is not involved in the study. That's for sure.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
Yeah.
I never would have thought of bringing them together if it wasn't for the Residence Science Foundation and listening to all these lectures and I mean interactions, and thank you.
Thank you, Simon.
Thank you. Thank you, Simon. I think Oriana's questions came after, it seems to me. I know there's an upcoming, anonymous. Okay. Should we bring forward anonymous attendees?
I think there's more than a couple anonymous attendees. We might have competing.
We can put an icon, a general icon for that person in. But that's a good question. I think many people want to know. So when is the next paper coming? So definitely it's coming this year before December. What the missing piece of the puzzle has been completed. In fact, not so long ago, I think it was 1 month, maybe 1 month before. No, not even that. We were meeting with Nassim, and he was downloading all the work to an external physicist. So this was the first time he would show the complete theory to an external colleague, let's say, and he and Carla Galdames from the University of Santa Cruz in California. And well, it was amazing. It was amazing to see it all fulfilled. You know, like it was a revelation. It was beautiful, and she was completely overwhelmed by what she saw. So like Nassim was so happy. He said, like, Jesus, now we are ready. You were really ready to move forward. And you know, this was like a kind of a test. Like, let's see how this goes through. And it was completely successful. So and then we got to realize that the model was complete. He was happy with it, with everything. All the important connections were built in such a way that there was no how would you say that, blind spot. There was no blind spot, no more blind spot. Everything was connected. So to reach that stage, it took 3 years almost, but I think it's nothing compared to what's going to be outside. I mean, it's incredible. All this work coming out in just 3 years is just, well, that's resonance. The only way of explaining such a thing is just by resonance. There's no other way. So yeah, and it's a beautiful, and I think that well, it's just incredible. So yeah, it will be ready. So it was so it's just a matter of writing the article properly, having the connections to the journals that's gonna receive it, and probably even a thesis will come out of it. I think a doctoral thesis for Nassim, and which is much more than a thesis. No one has ever done such a thesis. I mean, they can give him the thesis and Nobel Prize at the same time, like, okay. But anyway, so that's so the time it takes. So just for you to know, when you complete a paper, and so there's two things that must happen. First, complete the paper, then you have to load it into archive. Once you're ready, you're sure this is the final version that you want to send to publication, you can load it in archive. So it guarantees that the copyright is already preserved. And then during that time, the work will be going scrutiny through peers, peer reviewed, and all of that. And that can take a couple of months. And I think it will be incredible at that stage. So when the paper is already ready to publicate for publishing, then it will come out to everyone, probably through an archive, or probably will be a shorter version of the paper, because the paper, I mean, it's more than 1,000 equations, 1,000 equations or more. So you cannot put that in a paper. So probably will be like a very short, let's say, summary, and that would be like Yeah, so it's coming this year for sure, before December.
Something we can all get excited about, I think. And yeah, that's an interesting thought. A doctoral thesis that also wins a Nobel Prize. Looking forward to
That's
it.
the least they can.
The
I
least,
mean.
yeah.
But well, yeah.
So there's the next question is from Oriana, and also I see she has her hand up. So let's definitely address this question. Does the endoplasmic reticulum in the mitochondria create laser light? Let me just pull up Oriana real quick. If you'd like to speak, I don't know if I think the video function is still disabled, but feel free to say hi and
say hello anyway. Yes.
say hello anyway. Yeah, thank you for the question. Yeah, so the endoplasmic reticulum, just so that everybody is familiar with this subcellular structure that we're talking about, you have the cell, the cellular membrane. At the center, you have the nucleus. And the nucleus is another membrane-bound compartment that contains the genomic DNA, much of the mRNA transcripts that are going to the endoplasmic reticulum to be transcribed. So you have a nuclear membrane, and this is a highly complex structure because it's tightly regulating what's coming into the nucleus that's going to interact with the DNA. So, these are gene signaling molecules that are being allowed in, and also tightly regulating the export of ribonucleic acid mRNA products that are going to be transcribed into proteins, among other functions. The endoplasmic reticulum forms a veritable extension of the nuclear membrane. So it extends from the nucleus, and it has that name, reticulum. That's the opposite of articulate. If something is reticulate, it has a snaking sinusoidal roundabout type path, where something that's articulate is straight to the point. So the endoplasmic reticulum is a membrane, a highly enfolded membrane in the plasma of the cell. And its primary role is in organizing the translation of mRNA transcripts from the DNA code into membrane-bound proteins, transmembrane proteins. And these are some of our most important functional components of the cell, because these are things like the neurotransmitters, aquaporin, that regulates the osmotic transport of water and water homeostasis. So that's one of its primary roles, but it also has a very important function in regulating calcium homeostasis. The levels of intracellular calcium. And calcium is a very important ionic species in terms of cellular communication. And just as a note, it's of very high interest to quantum biologists, because it's gone so far as that many are calling calcium the quantum to chemical transducer. So there's this idea that you can have quantum information processing, which would involve entanglement and massively parallel information processing. So you could have components that are not localized in any specific space, but they can be delocalized. But nevertheless, all of their information processing capabilities are synchronized. That's the coherence. And so they're processing the same information in parallel in that delocalized manner. And that's partly through entanglement. That's like a quantum information processing. But then, the question is, okay, you have this quantum information. How do you get that into physical information that the cell can use, biochemical information? And it's thought, and it's been shown in a lot of really fascinating theoretical modeling, that calcium is playing this role of the quantum to chemical transducer of quantum information processing, entanglement type information. One example of that is the so-called Posner cluster. So this is a molecule that comes from ATP, adenosine triphosphate, that's generated in the mitochondria via the ATPase machinery. And just as a side note, mitochondria is also very intimately involved in regulating calcium flux and calcium homeostasis in the cell in tandem with the endoplasmic reticulum. But one of the things is when the mitochondria is making ATP, that ATPase is synthesizing ATP. So that's adenosine triphosphate, that's 3 phosphate groups. Those phosphate groups are quantum entangled. There's no doubt about that, particularly because phosphorus has a very particular spin, quantum spin. The only other atom or element that has the same spin state as phosphorus is hydrogen. And so, like hydrogen is used for nuclear magnetic resonance imaging. You can also use phosphorus. But because of the spin state, it has long-lived entanglement because it has an electromagnetic quadrupole that is weakly interacting with ambient electrical and magnetic fields, electromagnetic fields. So ATP can maintain potentially the entanglement of these phosphate groups for quite a long time. So you've got all this quantum entangled ATP molecules coming out of the mitochondria. And one of the ways that it exchanges that energy, that information from the ATP, is by donating one of those phosphate groups. It'll detach, it becomes ADP, adenosine diphosphate, and that one of the phosphate groups is attached to another molecule. But now you have a quantum entangled link between a molecule that now has that quantum entangled phosphate group and your ATP molecule. What's been shown is that calcium can form this shell around hydrolyzed phosphate groups and shield them from decoherence so that the entanglement is maintained for very long times, like 5 minutes up to a day or 2 days. So, that's enough time for a quantum entangled Posner group, a Posner molecule, in one of your cells to travel across through the body to another cell. Now you have an entanglement link between the two. And part of the regulation of this mechanism is coming from the endoplasmic reticulum and calcium levels. So how much the calcium flux that it's allowing into the intracellular space. Now, in terms of coherent electromagnetic generation, laser light emissions, this is certainly going to be occurring in the endoplasmic reticulum as part of the information coupling and exchange mechanism. It's not going to be as prominent as in the mitochondrial reticular matrix. But because of the interaction of the mitochondrial reticular matrix with the endoplasmic reticulum, the coordination is going to be occurring via this laser-like light exchange. But you know, it's just that the mitochondrial reticulum is generating these coherent light signals, but it also is channeling them because due to its physical properties, it's able to act as an optical waveguide resonator.
So is this the main communication intracellularly? It's what I'm getting from this laser light. It's almost like a networking, a template before it comes into physical form. So it's the quantum field becoming particulate matter. And what you're saying then is the calcium channel is giving the earthing to the light that's actually coming in to the mitochondria reticulum, giving that entangled particle message to the endoplasmic reticulum. Based on the calcium level, then it is directed towards another cell or cells, as it were. But the whole networking then is like an electrical pulsing, alive, conscious light being within our physical form.
Very well said. Yeah, a veritable light body.
Yeah.
Yeah. You know, it's like we can see all the physical components, all the physical structures in the cell, but all of those have like a holographic laser-like light imprint associated with them and dynamic associated with them.
Yeah, while you were speaking about the octopus, I was remembering having spent a month at Esalen in doing continuum, which was the deep inner practice of going with movement internally. We do it 8 hours a day and sometimes all night long, exploring through movement and feeling these deep inner rhythms and patterns. And then I went afterwards to the Monterey aquarium and sat with an octopus. I wish I had my camera on so I could show you what it felt like to communicate for hours with this octopus, in that they turn colors as well as all the pulsing movement, and the way their body flows internally is quite like what you see it moving in all directions, almost like a mermation of birds, or like long hair flowing underwater is one, but that it's moving individually, communicating as an individual and network simultaneously. And that's what I was getting, that you were describing as that coherent light through the mitochondrial reticulum to the endoplasmic reticulum, all the way then disseminated and broadcast through the cell. And each time it gets amplified and directed. Is that a
yeah, you know, because it's I think a good example, because you know what you're seeing in that synchronization, that remarkable, amazing synchronization of changing pigmentation on the integument area of the octopus. You know, that kind of synchronization is just a recapitulation at a larger scale of what kind of synchronization is occurring at the cellular level with like the light communication for coordination, orchestration, and synchronization. So I think that's a really adept link to draw there.
and do octopus have mitochondria then as well?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, so that's what I'm feeling and sensing, is that's the mitochondrial flowing patterns, like we're octopus internally connected through. Maybe we're just giant octopus that learn to be bipedal. Yeah, that's extraordinary. I mean, and what you were saying about Mitochondria and that DNA pulsing that pattern, and the water then holding that alignment with the phosphorus, then be programming the hydrogen in the water itself to hold that form even when the phosphorus was removed.
Yeah, yeah. Some of the calculations that have been done on determining the amount of time that you have this high coherence, this entanglement with the phosphate molecule involving the phosphorus atom. The calculations are involving molecularly ordered water in the Posner molecule. So, you're going to have a direct interaction between the information, that quantum information that's in that positive molecule and the hydration shell, the water liquid crystalline ordered phase around it. And so, if that is going and attaching to microtubules, for instance, and that's just Stuart Hameroff and some of his other colleagues have described the function of calcium in memory encoding on microtubules, because calcium can activate the calmodulin molecule that can imprint the microtubule lattice structure. So it's not difficult to draw like these direct connections between this positive molecule interacting with the calmodulin, interacting with the microtubule, and that ordered liquid crystalline phase of the hydration shell attaching to the microtubule to facilitate the exchange of that information. A very similar thing could be occurring with the DNA. In just about any one of these processes, water is going to be playing a central role in it.
Okay, so I'll leave this question to the next time, but Ines, where does the double torus come into all of this communication and structuring that the double torus then is feedback into the entelechy of evolution? Okay, I'll leave that for next time.
One for you to think about, Ines.
That's it. Thank you all. That was wonderful.
Thank you for the question.
It's got me pondering anyway. Okay, thank you all. Bye-bye.
If you wanted, Inez, we could you could take one more question if you would like. I think that we were going to try to wrap up around 1:30, but if you're willing to keep going, we can maybe have an encore here. You're muted right now.
Yeah, you're okay. Let's go for one more. Let me see. Where were we?
I think there was a question that was directed directly to you.
Yeah,
this will kind of put you on the spot here, but it's by Philip Westcott. So he was asking about quartz crystals and their interaction with the harmonic flux resonator, but there was a question specifically for you on this consciousness research, I think, that you're doing. Will this help us to understand how to control the process of manifestation of the external experience?
Yeah, good question. Okay, okay, control the manifestation. Well, it is probably so we can ask ourselves, why would the universe go through all this trouble of creating self-awareness, apart from the fact that it wants to perceive itself? No, this is of course some kind of a speculation, but let's get philosophical about it. No, so I was thinking that maybe so one of the reasons why that would happen is to create creators, like I would say, no, to create the experience of being able of manifested creations from our own individual consciousness or collective consciousness as a species.
Yes.
I would say maybe, no? So, I mean, that would be nice.
So my interest comes from my practice of Dharma, and I've been a Dharma practitioner and studying Dharma for 10 years, and there are so many, there's so much alignment with what's happening in the foundation and the studies of you and your colleagues with the teachings of Dharma from 2,600 years ago, which, and the follow-on activity through meditation, which is concerned with how we can improve our external environments through internal processes rather than constantly shuffling our external experience to try and match our expectations. Really, that's the origin of my question and my interest.
Yes,
that was my original interest in coming to the foundation and listening to you guys and learning to understand about your work, because I'm not a scientist, and so I come from, I guess, from a different place from many, I guess, that you speak to. Yeah.
Yeah, I see. I think I see where you're going. Okay.
So part of our interest is, there's a pilot project about to start, I think, with families in how they can help their children to manifest their desired experiences externally without conflict in the external, if you understand what I'm saying. Yeah. So it's an experiment into non-conflict, or for the development of non-conflict experience in the external. And I was wondering if really that isn't where your research is taking us from a humanistic point of view, you know.
It is linked to that. It is part of it. It's not just that. What we have been learning from this, it's like, just as I mentioned, the resonance aspect of it, no? Yeah. Like I'm probably I'm sure that this would have not happened if the elements were not properly in place, like to see such an effect, let's say, you know. So what we're facing is not our will, our only our will. I mean, this is what I'm going to. It's like an agreement. It's like we're being taught during this process, and this is why Shinter is called the apprentice of the lattice of the field. Okay. So yeah. So this means that we are not so because of course when you say you want to manifest your reality, who is it that is speaking on your behalf?
That's good. That's a good question. I understand.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So first of all, so there's a lot of psychoanalysis also involved in this. Yes, of course, of course. I mean, there's the work from Lacan, Jung, all of these people, but Lacan basically say you don't know what you desire. You think you desire what you desire, but what you desire is the desire of others coming through you. And you think so we are so programmed. And this brings me to the recent controversy regarding Lambda, you know, the sentient AI, supposedly sentient AI that Google was supposed to develop.
Yeah.
Okay. Yep. Why? Because okay, so Lambda,
the sentient algorithm, wasn't it?
Yeah, the sentient algorithm. We don't know exactly how sentient it is. I mean, I think I would say there's no sentience, but I cannot say there's none. I cannot say, because I don't know. You know, I don't have the tools to evaluate that. Okay, let's say. Yeah. But let's say, but it's interesting, the analogy, because this sentient AI, at least it makes us believe it is sentient, which is already very impressive. And so, but it's programming, and its programming could be very sophisticated. And if it is extremely sophisticated up to the point that it looks like sentient and self-aware and all of that.
It appears intuitive.
And intuitive.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very,
Yeah,
very
yeah, that's
intuitive.
incredible.
Yeah.
I mean, it is, you wouldn't, I mean, that's why it was tricky, because if that technology gets in the wrong hands, they can trick you, you know, like a fraudulent call, and then you whatever. I mean, it's.
I understand.
Yeah, you know, so, but the thing is that we act like animated machines until we don't know where we're talking from.
Yeah.
So in that sense, we're not that different from this sentient AI or
So
not.
if we come from a place of healing, which I liked about Jeff's question earlier, and said, okay, this inquiry comes from a space of healing and a willingness or a wish to create a better human experience.
But that's another thing. You know, for instance, you don't know what this disease. Okay, so of course, we all want to be healthy and we need to heal. Yes, but when a disease has happened, there's something. There's a message going on that it has to work out. Like why? You know, it's a somatize a problem, like something. It's probably something internal that's gone so deep that's manifested in something external. Like in something physiologically, and hence more difficult to heal. Because if you heal it in the subtle realm, then it doesn't manifest as a disease. So what is the work that you're not allowing to go through, you know, when this healing is happening? So so I don't know if so there are many there. I think it's a good approach to want to create your own reality and manifest it from within. Right. But it's going to be very clean. I mean, it's got to be the I doing that. It's like, who is
there is no I. There is no I.
Well, that's the thing. There is an I in the sense that that perspective is on that specific coordinates. And so that's why it is a combination of individual and collective consciousness. It is like both going. So that's what that there's this feed forward between the I and the we, and the all, the I, the we, and the all. And so this is where we are like learning to be part of this feedback loop. No, and I'll give you a very clear example. Not even in my. Okay, so I come from Venezuela. I'm a woman from Venezuela, and I did physics because of many circumstances that were not really, I want to understand what the world is about, the nature of reality. It was more complex than that.
Sure.
If I had decided, what I mean, I'm here because I didn't willingly decide to be here. If I had decided to be here, I wouldn't have the imagination to be here. You know what I'm saying? Sure. Of course, because I don't.
Are you just saying that other forces were involved in that process?
The forces of resonances. I mean, you're not, you know. So it's kind of letting things happen, manifest. But of course, setting limits to it and saying, okay, this no, this yes, this no. There's this feedback going on, of course, but. Not in my wildest imagination would I have thought that I would be here in this community, working with Nassim, with William. I mean, this is something extraordinary. So in order for the extraordinary to manifest, most of the times the ego would stand on the way.
Right.
Your sense of who you are. So it's not a linear answer. I mean, I cannot tell you. It's most of the time people, I mean, of course, if you're not comfortable with a situation and you want to change it, you have to change it from within. You cannot force it from the outside. You have to change it from within, and then it will be manifesting differently.
Expressed in the external.
It will be expressed, but there's a whole internal work that has to happen in order for that to go. Yes, of course.
I guess that's where my question centered, really.
Yeah, this is going in that direction. And
that's why I'm fascinated by your work.
But this is going in the direction of working of the interior work, and there's a lot of course, there's discipline, but of course, there's also cleaning the mess. Let's some mess that has to be cleaned up, like organized.
Understand.
You know, so
Yeah.
so I mean, for instance, and that, yeah, before I forget, so when Jacobo Greenberg was doing this, was measuring these states in his patients, he would see that the states lasted very, very short time, because you get easily distracted by some you're thinking about the bills you have to pay, or what happened with your couple, or whatnot. So we're very easily distracted from this coherent state, completely distracted from it.
Yeah.
And this chaos, so then he said, okay, so, and now we come to Jose Luis. He said, okay, so that was one thing that we saw was not working. How can you have this state stay longer, so to be more coherent? So what we learned is that you have to thrive in chaos. It is those parts of yourself that you have to work on, which are the back door, the entrance, the direct entrance to the field, because that's where you place your attention. You know, so it's trying to learn. It's kind of an Ericksonian approach, in which you say, okay, I have these issues I have to work on, but I won't fight them. I want to learn from them and be able to transform that into something, because everything is energy at the end. So I want to transform that into something that's useful for me and that I can transcend. But you have to deal with that. Okay. So yeah, and I say that from a direct experience from this person, because if someone has had a very chaotic life, that has been him. So you would have not expected this coming from someone who had the life he had, you know, from the childhood, childhood involved, everything that was in place, the things that were in place would not have, you would have thought that of someone who's meditating in the, like Dalai Lama, in this Tibetan fortress in which everything is, you know, coherent and all that. No, this happened in the extreme chaos. And that's something interesting to keep in mind. We live in Mexico, we're in Mexico City, you know, pollution. I live in the middle of pollution.
It's an imperfect world.
Noise, exactly. But if you're able to do things, even under those circumstances, then many things can happen. That's my.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
That's a beautiful answer. But Buddha says that, you know, regardless of our circumstances, we should always be able to find a place of happiness and inner peace.
Exactly.
That's our objective. If we can find that place and always revert to that space, then we always have a datum point by which we can continue our inquiry.
Yes, exactly.
You know, when you see pictures of the Buddha, he'll be smiling, but his eyes are closed. He's not smiling because things around him are great and the world is perfect. He's smiling because
things around him in his world are great.
Well, because he's found within him a happy place, a place of peace and serenity.
The space of emptiness, and that's what you guys are calling the vacuum.
Mm-hmm. The still point.
I've got a feeling that it's referring to the same thing, and that's also my interest in my inquiry. You know, this granular space that you guys talk about is actually emptiness, according to the Buddha, I think. Yeah.
That's great, William, that you brought that up, because one of the features of this meditation that you have to do is open-eyed. You cannot close them. That's what, because you have to have this in how do you say stimulations of the outside, and you have to surpass them. That's what creates the coherence between both hemispheres. You cannot have your eyes closed.
I know that there's some alchemical meditation practices that absolutely require the eyes to be open, even within like Dzogchen Buddhism.
Yeah, it's a choice, actually, whether or not you like to have your eyes completely closed or partially open. It's a choice. It's a personal preference, actually. And you're absolutely right. It does affect your experience of the meditation and the mind and the whole thing. So.
Yeah. Well,
I'm very grateful for your time in this. Thank you, and William, for bringing my question up. And I hope we get lots of opportunities in the future to discuss these as your investigation unfolds and we learn more.
Thank you for the question, Philip.
Thank you for the question.
Pleasure. Thank you very much. And I look forward to reading the books that you've referred to, and Ines. And yeah, good luck with the forthcoming research and the papers.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
So that brings us to the end of today's transmission, today's exploration. So thank you everybody for joining us. Thank you very much, Ines, for bringing so much blazing insight and sharing the fantastic news on the upcoming publication of your book. That's going to be really exciting to check out. We have a breakout group session on August 10th, the next Resonance Academy faculty Q&A, August 17th. So I hope you all can join us for those events. It'll be very much a continuation of this exploration. So I know I'm looking forward to it. So thank you all, and until then, may the vacuum be with you.
Yeah.
Thanks, William. Thanks,
Thanks,
everyone.
William. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.